A few weeks ago, we recognized an engineering student named Jorge after his girlfriend Adriana told us how big a fan he is of the show. Hearing afterwards from Jorge about how much it meant to him was one of the more rewarding experiences I've shared with our listeners. Here's what he said. Words cannot begin to describe how grateful and appreciative I am of both you and Adriana for gifting me such a memorable and amazing moment. I still can't believe it. Well, Jorge, it was our pleasure. And it gave us an idea. Live today, we are introducing a new program to the Being an Engineer podcast to recognize engineers who excel in their field. We're calling it the Being an Engineer Circle of Excellence, and we hope it will be a way to more fully realize the mission of the podcast as a tool through which engineers learn about and connect with relevant people, resources, and opportunities. We also hope it will be a way for you, the listener, to experience the joy and excitement associated with recognizing worthy peers and being recognized by your peers. To submit a nomination, go to teampipeline.us/excellence and fill out the form with the name of your nominee and a short description of what makes him or her deserving of the award. We here at the podcast will review the submissions and select winners. Those winners will be announced and recognized on the show and will receive some complimentary Being an Engineer podcast swag. The program is live right now. Go to teampipeline.us/excellence and give a deserving engineer the gift of a memorable and amazing moment of their own.
Once they got in our simulator and they saw how good it was, they fell in love with it. And they were just, oh my gosh, this has got to be the way I train my, 37 or 120 officers.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of the Being an Engineer podcast. Today, Bob Ferris is joining us, who holds a degree in systems engineering from the University of Arizona and is CEO at VirTra, where his team helps prepare law enforcement and military personnel for real-life incidents through state-of-the-art simulators and surreal scenarios. Bob, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. One quick update. I am now co-CEO. We have John Givens, who is also a co-CEO. So we have two folks sharing the CEO title at VirTra today.
Okay. Thank you for that update. Appreciate it. Well, Bob, first question, what made you decide to become an engineer?
That's a great question. I think it had to do with the fascination of how things worked and if I could make things work better. Growing up, my father was not very mechanical. I'm told my grandfather was extremely mechanical and actually was a skilled machinist after the Great Depression. But my father ended up becoming an educator, which was interesting. It has some implications to the company Ferris Productions and VirTra that we'll get to later. But my father would, at a very early age, I was the one assembling furniture. I was the one making the stereo work. I was the one when we ended up getting a TV. Yeah, that's how old I am. I was the one to kind of figure it out. And so I ended up just kind of enjoying it. And I had this kind of big runway as a kid, and it gave me the opportunity to make a whole bunch of mistakes. Oh my goodness. I made a lot of mistakes, but it was a great environment to learn and to create and to just work with my hands on different projects.
Do you think it was a relief to your dad when maybe he wasn't so mechanical and he realized, oh, Bob is very mechanical. I can just give all of this stuff to him and not have to worry about it?
It is. And sadly, he took the same approach with computers years later. So he still needs quite a bit of help with computers. But yeah, no, it was very healthy for me. And I think a lot of fathers or mothers jump in and do a lot. They think it's their responsibility as the parent, and they don't often let the kids actually assemble the furniture or build the things. And so I think it can sometimes be a great exercise to at least include them, if not let them give it a shot. And then yeah, there were many times there were extra parts, especially when I was 8 years old and assembling. I remember I remember assembling a stereo system and the furniture for the stereo, and the furniture for the stereo definitely had extra pieces at the end.
I have two sons and a daughter, and one of my sons in particular is very interested in putting things together and building things. The others as well, but one in particular, and we just got a 3D printer for the family, for the house, and we ordered the kit, which does not come assembled, and that was we did have a few screws extra at the end of it, so crossing fingers that everything's going to work well, but so far so good there. Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. You're CEO of a company called VirTra, and we'll certainly get into that today. Before we go there, can you tell us about the first company you started, which was Ferris Productions, which eventually became VirTra, but it was quite a bit different in the beginning?
Yes. Yeah. Ferris Productions eventually became VirTra. I started it in college. I was reading a book about virtual reality, and I got Howard Rheingold's book, and I got halfway through the book. And there were stories about what NASA was doing with virtual reality. What the entertainment industry was just starting to experiment with virtual reality. And it was just so fascinating that I got halfway through. I called my parents and said, I want to start a company that's doing virtual reality, and I think I could spend my whole career working in this field and just scratch the surface of it. And I just foresaw devoting my career to this field of creating synthetic realities, which it's a combination, obviously, of software and input simulating. We've simulated smell at times, tactile feedback at times. A lot of what we do is firearm simulation, which is eventually where VirTra emerged as a leader. But in the early days of Ferris Productions, we were interested at first on education, but our proposal was not accepted. So then we shifted into entertainment, and we spent about the first 10 years or so building almost entirely custom simulators for Fortune 500 companies, and Six Flags, Busch Gardens, those sort of places. One time we were requested to put a simulator at Disney, but it turned out that they actually wanted us to pay them to put our equipment there, and we declined. So,
yeah. Was there much competition back then for these types of simulators?
That's a very interesting question. When we started in '93, our business our application for a corporate name, we put down that we were immersive virtual reality. Well, in 1993, a lot of people would get a chuckle out of that, because in 1993, the Pentium 90 had just come out. There was not even something called a GPU for a PC. They didn't exist. And we had to use something called renderware, which were tricky algorithms out of a Great British company, just to have three-dimensional shading on objects in '93. And many would say that's starting a virtual reality company too early. And we have the scars to show that we started it too early. The first 17 years were a real struggle for the company because we were a bit early on that. But that early Ferris Productions did lay the groundwork that later became VirTra.
Hmm. Well, I read an interview that you had done about Ferris Productions. At least you spoke about Ferris Productions for some time. And you said, I had no products, no money, and no customers, but I had a passion and knew the best engineering students. So I think you went straight from school into starting your own business. You mentioned it was a struggle in the beginning. How did you even have the confidence to think to yourself, yeah, I can start this virtual reality company when the technology barely exists and I've never done this before, but sure, I can do this.
Well, I think it gets back to passion. I don't think I was thinking clearly or logically. I grew up in a household that really that my parents really emphasized. You can accomplish whatever you set your mind to. They really emphasize never, 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 never give up. And I think that combination of thinking that anything is possible with enough determination and enough grit, and then support. My parents were very supportive from the day it started until this very day. My parents are both living, and they're major supporters of VirTra. And so I think that was critical. No matter how tough it got, my parents were in my corner. My wife was in my corner. I started the company single, ended up getting married, and my wife was, she was supportive since the moment she heard about the company. She actually works in accounting today at VirTra, but that's a fairly recent item. When we were first married and we ended up having children, she stayed home with our kids for several years. But she has an engineering degree as well. You might want to have her on the program, as long as her story doesn't conflict with mine. I think we're okay. But
she's to do a pre-show check there. Yeah.
she's a systems engineer from University of Arizona, and big time Wildcat fan. I attended ASU for a short time, so my heart goes out to ASU and U of A, but my wife's is only about the Wildcats. So
fair enough. That probably makes for some healthy debate at home, I'm sure. All right. Well, going back to a comment you had made about knowing all the best engineers back when you started Ferris Productions, what are some common behaviors or traits that you've observed in the best engineers?
Yeah, that's a loaded statement, and I think it's worth unpacking. So when I was at the University of Arizona, because I was in classes with the engineers, I was an engineering student myself. I knew who had the highest work ethic. I knew who helped out fellow students. For example, at the time I was there, the number one electrical engineering student, she was one who would not help anyone in her class. She was very focused on her own GPA. She would plead with teachers to get an A. And I knew all of the background. The number two student, based on GPA, was a brilliant electrical engineer. And he actually helped out everyone in the class who needed any help, and was like a natural. But GPA was not at his top priority. He still had a great GPA, but it just wasn't his top priority. So in that case, a lot of companies would say, okay, this person over here is our top pick, whereas I, being kind of in the trenches, I kind of had extra scouting report on engineers. And I think it's interesting to point out that Netflix, Netflix has gone out on a limb many years ago. They were out on a limb, and they proposed that a great engineer versus a good engineer, and they were mainly focused on programmers and algorithms and debugging and that. But I think it could very well apply outside of just programming. But the difference, the economic value difference to a company between a great engineer, this is a top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% engineer, is 10 times different than a good engineer. And I guess that has to do with just an exceptional engineer makes so few mistakes. We all make mistakes, but they make exceptionally few. And they optimize so well along the way that they get to market faster. They can save massive amounts of infrastructure, and some of this is computer related. But it's just it was really remarkable that they did this, and everyone else has kind of followed suit, to where a lot of the companies out there are really seeking after the cream of the crop engineers. And that includes VirTra. So I'll do a little plug. Anyone who is a cream of the crop engineer, please contact VirTra. We're always looking for exceptional talent.
Only if you're willing to help other people. If you're negotiating for the best grade, need not apply. Those need not apply.
No. Yeah, that definitely, and I think that actually is a great segue to something that I can't claim this, but Warren Buffett is famous for saying that they look for three things when they hire people. They look for intelligence, they look for initiative or energy. I would add conscientiousness to that, and they look for integrity. And if the person doesn't have integrity, then Warren Buffett's famous for saying, then having high intelligence and high initiative will just kill you. It'll be horrible. And
it's dangerous.
It's very dangerous. And I'd seen another quote I haven't seen repeated, but Warren Buffett said something like, when I started in business, I tried to hire the smartest, best people I could find, most productive people, and they were smart and productive at stealing from me every dollar they could. And so then I changed my attitude and said, okay, I'm hiring the highest integrity, honest, good people first. And then I became a billionaire. That's something like that.
Huh. I hadn't heard that one before. That's very interesting. I think of Steve Jobs, who would say that we try and hire the smartest people out there and then have them tell us what to do. It doesn't make sense for us to hire these smart people and then tell them what to do, which I always thought was nice as well.
I heard another one similar, which was we hire the best, most productive people that aren't jerks. It's a good qualifier. There's no super smart, condescending person that is so good that we can just insert them and make everyone around them upset and think it's a good overall strategy. So I think, and at different times during our life as a company, I've had the conversation with folks of, we really do try to hire intelligent, conscientious folks, but only so much as they can work well with others. So we are looking for that as well. So,
yeah, absolutely, it makes a huge difference.
It really does.
Well, let's see. At Ferris Productions, you worked with Fortune 500 customers. Now at VirTra, you work primarily with military and law enforcement. How are these two customers different, or are they?
How they're the same. They want you to make them look good, and whether they say it to you or not, you should just assume that as a company, your job is to make those who pick your company and decide on selecting you, that they are the heroes. And the more you can make them the heroes, a lot of times people think like they've got to promote their company every second of every day, and it gets very tiring for customers to hear everything you guys are great at, and so a lot of engineers, frankly, that's not why they got into engineering, is to be a marketing machine for the company. So the good news is that it's not that effective anyway. The best thing you can do is show your competency and make them look great.
Huh. Well, speaking of the military, that's a good segue into VirTra. What happened, many years ago that made you rethink the business model at Ferris Productions and eventually pivot into VirTra?
Well, 9/11 happened, to be frank. as we all probably remember, what we were doing when we heard the news of aircraft flying into towers and killing thousands and thousands of people, and the potential start of a war for existence against people who could use all sorts of methods to wreak chaos and havoc on our way of life. I looked around and thought, okay, we're some of the best simulation experts on the planet right now. Because we started so early, we have all of this accumulated experience. During the summer times, we were doing about 400,000 people in our headsets in theme parks. I still don't think today many companies have equaled that amount of experience that we had. We've literally put millions and millions of headsets on people and designed them for ergonomics. So we had all this expertise, and I thought, well, maybe this could be useful for police, first responder, military training. And so we looked into doing that, and we realized that industry had really stagnated for years and years and years, and the companies in that arena were kind of matching the speed of some of those slow bureaucracies. And we, coming from the Fortune 100, Fortune 500 world, were just lightning fast in comparison. So we went about, how do we reinvent simulation? And we came up with different ideas, like, well, they're only using one screen, but reality is 360 degrees. So let's build a 360 degree simulator. It later ended up being that most people wanted easy ingress and egress, so we went from 360 to 300. A lot of people don't know that. Our first simulators were full 360, but then the popular model became the 300 degree, and we basically discontinued the 360. But 300 degrees of coverage, they really wanted realistic humans, so we used video that was seamless between all screens. We did interactive branching with a new technology called VirTra, in which we could use green screen characters, and that was a brand new concept in 2004. We combined them all together using gigabit networking, which had just come out, and the cards were like $50 a piece, and so that kept our costs lower on the hardware. And then we also started working on drop-in recoil kits with another company out of Oklahoma, and that became the standard for a lot of training in the future. But our focus was on locking back the slide. So after you shot 30 rounds, it would lock back just like a real gun, or we could act like it jammed and have them train for jams during training. And then on top of that, the kind of crown on the top of all of this was, we decided that if in real life you can shoot at hostiles, then in our training, hostiles will be able to shoot back at you. And so in training, you need to have some nervousness, you need to have some fear of pain, because in real life, you're going to have fear of loss of life, not just pain. And that's going to weigh on you mentally and physically, and psychologically. And so what we did was we added ThreatFire to the system. ThreatFire is an electric impulse device that simulates return fire. So during the scenario, you can feel what amounts to about a hard pinch of your skin. And that pinch of your skin can come in the direction of hostile fire. So sometimes if you're not paying attention, if your head's not on a swivel, you might be looking in one area and somebody pops out and actually shoots you from another area. And so by having this ThreatFire device, we can simulate that. We can raise heart rate. We can increase we can increase the parasympathetic nervous system response. We can have them simulate those kind of situations much more realistically. And so we essentially in 2004, we released the world's first realistic simulator for what police actually face, or also what military face, that could include full-on ambushes if necessary. And it was light years ahead. In fact, it ended up being 12 years later before any company put a 5-screen simulator on the market. And of course, when they did it, it was a fraction because we kept investing in new technology and new content and expanded our capabilities. So it was far behind us at the time, but it took 12 years before any company actually matched the product that we put out in 2004. And that engineering team in 2004 was like 3 people strong.
Wow. Amazing. This brings up a question I've heard asked on another podcast that I really like, how I built this. It's about how entrepreneurs build companies. The host there always asks his guests, how much do you think luck was involved in building your business versus how much was skill? Like, what's the split there? I mean, you guys seemed like you were perfectly poised, to make this pivot, because of that, all the experience you had at Ferris Productions, and you had such an advantage there that it was, like you said, 12 years later before someone else, could even start competing against you. How much do you think luck played into that versus just skill and tenacity and hard work?
I think it certainly played a role. I mean, we were careful to not poke the bear, if you would. We didn't. If we won, we started with $0 of simulation sales. So we sold off the entertainment side of the business around 2002, and focused entirely in 2002. We were 100% focused on military and police training, and we had no product. So that whole thing you started out with, where no money, no product. Well, we had experience in building simulators for Fortune 500, but we hit the reset button, and we had an idea of how painful that would be to start from scratch. But we started in 2004 with a release of a product and 0 customers and 0 installed simulators, which is you're always going to have a tough road to hoe when you start there. But that's where we started in 2004. And fortunately, we were able to get some sales, and then it snowballed from that. But it was really a product centric thing. And I think Elon Musk has talked about this and others, where, if you have a great product, if you have a product that really has no equal, and it is the best in category, and that was right around the time SEO was happening. We put like $1,700 investment into SEO, is probably the best money we ever spent in any area of our company, and we did it right around that time because it put us at the top of organic searches, and we had all these people that were looking for simulators that would at least come and give us a chance. What we needed were at-bats. Once they got into our simulator and they saw how good it was, they fell in love with it, and they were just, oh my gosh, this has got to be the way I train my 37 or 120 officers. This is how we've got to train. And so that's really what really helped build the company was having a great product. And I think, behind any great company, you're going to find great product or great products.
Wow, that's incredible. What a great story. I'm going to take just a very quick break here and share with the listeners that teampipeline.us is where you can learn more about how we help medical device and other product engineering or manufacturing teams develop turnkey equipment, custom fixtures, and automated machines to characterize, inspect, assemble, manufacture, and perform verification testing on your devices. We're speaking with CEO Bob Ferris today. Bob, for what situations is VirTra's simulated training effective, and are there situations in which it is not the best solution?
Well, let me start with the last part of your question. Absolutely, there are things that our simulator does not do well. And we are big believers in best tool for the job. So live fire training, actually using real bullets with your real firearm, can do things that we cannot. Right? You can experience the actual the impact, the sound, the smell of firing your weapon, and so all of that can become more. You can become more inoculated to it. But there's certain things that you simply cannot do on a live fire range. You do not probably want to be challenged with 360 degrees of threat to where you're spinning around and you could fire in any direction at any time. Now, in real life, that's the world you exist in. You don't get to have a firing line in real life. Even in a military engagement, there's never going to be a clear, universally accepted firing line that everyone will abide by. So you live in a 360 degree world, frankly, a spherical 360 degree world. At a shooting range, we squish that down into almost always a very, really almost a 1 to 2 dimensional world. In a way, if you line up and everyone shoots in the same direction, you're almost like a slight variation of a 1-dimensional world. It's very compact, and it's there for safety reasons. There's a lot of thinking behind that. But with VirTra, you can be with a partner. You could do scenarios that might endear you to do something like a muzzle sweep, which is a big no-no. That means that, if I see a threat and I've got a threat fire on and I just got hit by a bullet on my bulletproof vest and that's simulated, I just felt pain, and so I'm really intent on eliminating the threat, and I'm tracking them, and as I swing around, my muzzle would go across you as my partner. That's a big no-no. What I need to do is recognize that it's you. I need to lift my firearm up over you because I'm never going to shoot through you ever. That's not going to work. And I never want to have my gun pointed at you in case something happens. If I get surprised by something, and if my finger's on the trigger, I could accidentally shoot my partner. Extremely dangerous thing, never to be practiced with live ammunition. But with VirTra and our realistic recoil kits, it's just one of many things that can be simulated and rehearsed and practiced, and people can have this become just a habit, a good habit that they follow, and then that can lead to much safer operating environments. And a lot of the skills that we're trying to provide are skills that save a half a second or a third of a second, or increase accuracy by 20% or 30% or 50%. And those things could mean the difference between life and death, or could mean the difference between engaging the wrong person and then having to live with the consequences, which can just be as tragic as if the person just died at the scene.
Even never having been involved with law enforcement or military situations myself, I can get a sense for how valuable this remarkable technology is. Has this type of training always been needed, do you think, to the extent that it is today, or have things changed in the world of law enforcement over the years that make simulated training especially useful now?
So I think that back in 1993, when we started the company, that there was a desperate need for proper training for the use of deadly force and the use of less lethal at that time. Now, 93 happened to be the year that both VirTra was founded and the creator of Taser was founded at that same time. But so that was a whole, in 93, there wasn't another option besides things like OC spray or batons and firearms and shotguns and things like that. So things have evolved, and VirTra, we are compatible with the various less lethal options, or as things evolve in the technology of de-escalation. We are the experts at training for de-escalation, and we're in 40 countries around the world in doing that. The focus, though, has always been, as I've seen, how did the police do the least amount of harm to affect public safety? That's generally, that's what we've seen with the customers we've encountered, is a focus on that. But our goal as a company is to make sure that they are trained at a higher standard. There is sadly sometimes more emphasis placed on the training of hairstylists, more requirements, more hours needed than there is for police. And the thinking was that hairstylists have scissors and shears that could hurt someone. We would propose that police have far more tools and are often thrust into situations where they have to deploy those tools, and they are sadly rarely given the opportunity to properly understand how to best use those tools and rehearse and practice over and over again deadly situations. And that's really where VirTra can come in.
That is a shocking analogy with the hairstylist. So in these simulated environments, how easy or difficult is it for those being trained to really immerse themselves in the system? Does it take very long to feel natural in that environment, to treat it like it's real life?
We've noticed that when you have a larger field of view and when you have natural looking people, i.e., you have like high definition video people, that the people suspend disbelief in those scenarios. And the inverse, you can imagine, is true. So if you have a more narrow field of view, or if you have like a computer generated avatar type person who you can't really tell what emotions they have, and they don't look or feel or move correctly like a human being, then those are situations that really break them out of immersion and really can often destroy the training value. In the worst case, they can actually create negative training. And just like the medical community, we try to make sure and do no harm. And sadly, many times people are so interested in selling a product that they actually will do harm, or sometimes they just don't have the deep experience in simulation that staff at VirTra do, and so they inadvertently do harm, where they do training that is, the tracking is slightly off, and now the brain is being confused. Well, when I aimed this way and I pulled the trigger at the live fire range, the bullet would enter the target in this position. Now during this maybe a VR headset training scenario, when I do the same thing, the bullet is entering 5 inches off to the left or a foot off to the left. Even it can be quite bad. And so now the brain is confused, and the trainee often will disregard the training entirely, which is a huge waste of opportunity to increase their skill, or they literally will confuse the mind enough in which the mind starts to wonder if it should take an average between live fire shooting and this virtual shooting. And a lot of that is subconscious. You don't often get a conscious vote in it. So it's very dangerous to do anything other than one-to-one training. Sometimes it can be worse to do a 1 to 1.3 training, because your mind will actually regress in skill, and that's a horrible outcome.
That sounds like your team has really delved deeply into the psychology of this training. I have a question about the hardware, the weapons that are used. I think a lot of especially the mechanical folks listening to this will be really interested in it. You mentioned like the recoil in some of the weapons. How does that work? Without giving anything confidential away, of course. and how is that experienced by the folks who are being trained?
Yeah, no, that's a comment I get from a lot of folks that love mechanical engineering and enjoy tough challenges. They really enjoy the idea of what we're trying to do. So we are attempting to recreate gunpowder, a violent chemical explosion, and we're trying to do that with no chemicals. And certainly no chaotic explosion, and we want to do that with some other means. Now, right now, a lot of what we do is we do that with CO2, or we do that with scuba air, so 3,000 psi and up air, and so those are the methods we use. But that could equally be, we have no if that could also be electric, if given the right components. But for now, the closest that we can get to that sharp, snappy experience of a bullet going off, while no projectile and no overpressure, unsafe overpressure is coming out of the barrel, so that there's safety for everyone in the area. That is a very tricky mechanical system that is just amazing, and we've really worked through valve issues, and it gets into material science, it gets into finite element analysis, it gets into properties of material, heat treating of metals. We don't create a lot of heat, but with CO2 we can create some cold. So it's cross-disciplinary. It is almost magical when it comes together to see this, just using some pressure in the size of a magazine, equaling the exact size of a magazine, and keeping almost everything else identical to a live firearm. And to see this firearm violently recoil, similar to what would happen with a live bullet, and yet being able to use that with training and have a laser or some tracking method on that weapon, it's fast. It's a magical experience.
Wow, it sounds phenomenal. I mean, just listening to describe the pressure and the valves and the material science and packaging all of that into something as small as a standard rifle magazine. This is like an engineer's playground, right? Developing something like that. How fun. For all you mechanical engineers out there looking for a big challenge, yeah, go ahead and contact VirTra. I watched one of the training simulations online. It was amazing how quickly I got pulled into the story just watching the scenario unfold. How are these simulations designed? I mean, are there professional actors and writers and directors? It seems like VirTra is probably as much of a media company as an engineering company. Is that an accurate statement?
It is, and it's summed up as content is king. So I've mentioned a lot of different things. I've mentioned about 300 and 360 degrees of screen. I've mentioned about realistic recoil firearms, realistic shoot back, and all of those are fundamentally valuable for training. But where a lot of the training occurs, possibly the lion's share of the training occurs, has to do with the scenario. And we hire professional actors. We do casting calls. We actually have people fall down and make sure that they can realistically fall down. You'd be surprised how many people we've had to turn away because they were unwilling to fall down in a realistic manner. And it just it's the attention to detail that helps suspend disbelief, but it's also a matter of thinking through a script that is very helpful for the police department. We can put police officers in situations that really test their knowledge of policy. I won't get into a lot of the detail of it, but there are situations where if you're really careful with how you build the scenario, you can really test somebody's knowledge of the policy and really open their eyes. I think one situation that we did recently was there was a gentleman distraught in his truck, and the officers approach in the simulation, and the person gets out of their car with a firearm. They're told to put it down. They're walking towards a building, and they actually enter the building. Now you have options of like taser, you have firearm, you can go hands-on. Now in our simulation, you might say I'm going hands-on, but the reality was that there was a branch. We have different branching, and one branch was the person would go in and actually start shooting inside the building. They had a firearm. They were not responding, and so but there's an inclination to never want to shoot someone in the back or never shoot someone who's not a threat to you personally. And frankly, our police are sometimes given situations that are way tougher than that, and many people can't even imagine the situations that police can be put into. And so we had one officer that was doing a traffic stop, and this is a real story. There was a car, and you could see from his body cam, a car drove by, backed up, and stopped about 3 feet from the officer. The guy, the person gets out of the car and immediately lunges with a machete at the officer from 3 feet away. The officer backs up and fires at the person, continuing to backpedal away from this person. And after the incident was done, he is reported to have told his chief, there are two things that I am so thankful that you provided. One, and first of all, is the VirTra simulator, because I did a scenario similar to this one about a week before it happened. And I think if I hadn't done that, I would not have had the reaction time that I needed. And second is the body cam footage, so that people know what this crazy thing happened, and I had no choice.
That's just amazing. Wow, what an incredible tool this is for all of the officers out there trying to protect and serve, and the military personnel as well. How fulfilling that must be for you personally to hear something like that. I think that maybe takes me to my last question here, which is, as a business owner and engineer, what's one thing that frustrates you, and conversely, what is one thing that brings you joy?
So I'll start with the joy. I mean, personally, I just love having an idea and then watching it come together, and then getting into, oh, this didn't quite work. Okay, let me try this. Oh, this part isn't quite right. Let me go find another one. The research of it, and creating something at the end that no one else in the world has created, that's unique and one of a kind. You know, I get a lot of satisfaction out of that, particularly if it's one of a kind and the best of its category. And so, you know, creating something that is uniquely useful to society that no one else has come up with. And sometimes that's simply a combination of amazing things that other people have come up with. I often stand on the shoulders of giants, and I have no problem doing that, because there's a lot of brilliant people out there, and a lot of brilliant products that, when combined in unique ways, can sometimes create something that's beyond the composition of the components. I think the other thing that I really enjoy is watching people, hiring the right people. That's a huge issue, and it's something that I feel is fundamental for any successful company, is hiring the right people. But watching people really fulfill their full ability to have. We have a CNC machine center right next door. We have structured light 3D scanners to go down to 5 micron to confirm SolidWorks file images are correct. We've really invested heavy, and that's just a few things. We have CMM down to 1.5 micron. So we have incredible capabilities that really support engineering, so they can go from concept to prototype to production in a quick manner, knowing that always mistakes are going to be made along the way, but to have as many of the rough edges smoothed out, and a lot of the path paved over, so that it can be speedy, is so critical in today's world where time is the most critical factor. But that's exciting to see us. We've done things where we've gone from idea to a working unit in like 37 hours. And we don't always do that. I mean, that's rare. But that was amazing to see. And it took, working alongside the machine, our machinist, talking to our engineers, and them sorting out the best, most efficient way to get it made. And so that's that's really rewarding when you see a team of people come together and do something that probably, is no one else in the world is doing quite as efficiently as we are. And I think for us, it's kind of like, I know Super Bowl Sunday's coming up. It's kind of like having a little Super Bowl victory every time you're able to pull that off. Like, being best in the world at creating a recoil kit from scratch, or doing some of these different projects that we do is really edifying. It's given us a competitive edge. Frustrating, I think the biggest frustration is just there's sometimes just not enough time in the day, and I wish I could get some extra hours inserted in certain days for sure.
Yeah, don't we all? I used to wish that there was a pill I could take for sleep, so I wouldn't have to sleep ever. But man, these days I sure do love my sleep. I think I might take the sleep over the pill these days.
Yeah. No.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for joining me today. I sure appreciate it. Anything else that you think we should cover that we haven't hit on yet?
No, I would just say in closing that, I throughout the years of VirTra, it seemed like there were moments when it felt like things fell into place, and I know there's different views on is the person lucky? Are they blessed by God? It seemed like there was divine help, and there were times when it really felt like we needed it. So, if I believe a God exists, and I would just say that we did what we could, and within our power, but there's a higher power involved, and it just, you couldn't say, if you looked at the history of the company, you really couldn't let an interview stop without mentioning that.
Powerful words, Bob. Thank you very much for bringing that up. I appreciate it. And thank you for being on the show with me today. Super interesting hearing about your background and all of your experiences and how VirTra was built, and just the really awesome engineering that's going on there at VirTra. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for your time and your interest in VirTra. Appreciate everyone who listened.
I'm Aaron Monker, founder of Pipeline Design and Engineering. If you liked what you heard today, please share the episode. To learn how your team can leverage our team's expertise developing turnkey equipment, custom fixtures, and automated machines, and with product design, visit us at teampipeline.us. Thanks for listening.